Another episode of the podcast, episode 16 of the HigherUp podcast. I'm your host, Michael Smoke, or HigherUp Wellness on various social media outlets. And today I'm going to be talking with you about a few things that I feel are really important. And I give practical tips and tricks about how to improve your fitness in the short term. But another thing that I talk about that is a lot more difficult, nuanced, and ambiguous is the long-term, lifelong commitment you make to yourself when you do this, because I would assume when most people get fit, they don't want to get fit for 3 months or 6 months or even a year. It is a game we play for the rest of our lives. And many people fail at that lifelong game. So in my community that I've mentioned before on podcasts, if you're interested in joining it, the link is in my bio on Instagram and TikTok. Go check it out. It's a very positive, encouraging place with over 170 people in it now. You can post, you can watch my exclusive content private to the community alone, and you can be around like-minded individuals. And today I decided to ask them specifically, what do they want to hear me yap about? Because, well, that's why I'm here, and it's one of my favorite things to do. And if you're watching this, you like to hear me yap, and I'm grateful. So I asked them what they wanted to hear me talk about, and a lot of it was around long-term success in fitness, in life, in setting goals, and something that I really enjoy talking about. So this episode is going to be less of short-term, how to increase your protein intake or what a workout program should look like, and more of, if you're going to do this until, Lord willing, the day you die, then these are the things that I think are important, or this is the knowledge that I believe has helped me the most, that I've inherited and learned from people a whole lot smarter and more successful than myself. I'm just fortunate enough to bring it to you today. So in the school community, which I have open here on my computer, I've got 6 comments, it looks like, from Matt, Holly, Luke, Caleb, and Seth. Guys, thank you for your submissions. I'm going to be rolling through all of these in real time and answering them off the top of my head. I have not rehearsed any answers, so I think that this is a way to give organic, real advice for how I'm feeling in the moment. And I hope that if it helps just one of you, then this will be a worthwhile episode. So we'll start with Mr. Matt Gardner. Matt asked me, I think hearing your perspective on good habit building and bad habit breaking, and more of a personal take on how you actively change your habits over time, and the effect that that's had on your development throughout all aspects of your life. So the essence of the question is, how do I, my unique experience, this is my anecdote, my unique experience, and not research or evidence or someone else's. So what works for me may not work for you, but I'm going to share what I've done. When it comes down to how to build good habits and how to break bad habits, there are some simple concepts that I've learned from a guy named James Clear, who wrote a fantastic book called Atomic Habits. And it's very logic forward. It appeals to logic and it makes a lot of sense to me. And that's why I promote it so heavily. Because to me, if something doesn't make logical sense, or if I have to think too hard about it, I'm probably not going to do it or adhere to it. And one of the principles that Clear talks about in his book is adding and removing friction from the good and the bad habits you want to build or eliminate. So we'll start with how I built good habits and how I believe anyone can build good habits, or at least start doing so. The thing you have to do is remove the friction between the thing you want to do more of. What does that practically look like? If I want to get my morning walk in, but I'm consistently oversleeping and I don't have the time to do a proper morning routine of morning sunlight, water, and movement, and cold exposure and activity, obviously, then I am going to remove barriers or friction, as James Clear calls it, to make that habit easier to execute. So I'll give you an example using the I want to get my morning walk in habit building challenge. Let's say normally I wake up with 20 minutes before I have to start my workday, and my shoes are in the closet, and my shorts are in the dresser, and my shirts are hung up, and I'm undressed when I wake up, and I'm totally out of it, and my phone is next to me on the bedside table, so I can simply reach over and snooze. That is adding friction between the thing I want to do more of, and we'll get into that for bad habits in just a minute. So how would I remove friction in this example? Simply put, I could take my shoes and I could put them right by the front door with my socks tucked in them. I can lay my shorts or pants and shirt or jacket, depending on where you live this time of year, out on my dresser or on the bed, at the foot of the bed, whatever. So you simply can wake up and throw them on. You don't have to think about what you need to grab. That's a simple trick, right? Lay out your clothes before school tomorrow. We learned that since we were kids. We just don't do it anymore. And I would move my phone further away so that I have to physically get up to eliminate the barrier of snoozing the alarm. If it's out of arm's reach, typically all we need is about 4 to 6 seconds to be awake to motivate us enough to get out of bed. And if you can move your alarm to where you have to physically stand up to get up and turn it off, you're a whole lot less likely to get back in the bed and snooze that alarm. Because at this point, you're up. Splash some cold water on your face. You now have the clothes laid out, so there's zero thinking involved in that activity. It is mindless. Get dressed, which I don't know about y'all. When I first wake up in the morning, I'm pretty mindless for a few minutes. I'm not a morning person. Never have been. So the clothes are on, and now all I have to do is simply walk down the stairs, and my shoes and socks are waiting for me where I laid them out the night before. This is just one example, but the rule of removing barriers or friction applies to any new habit you want to build. So maybe you want to eat less junk food. Well, you know what? We'll get into that for a bad habit. But that's how you build a good habit. Make it as easy as possible and create as few steps as possible between you and the thing you want to do more of. Now, on the opposite end of that, when you want to stop and break bad habits, you need to create as many barriers or as much friction as possible between you and the thing you want to do less of. An example that James Clear uses in the book is, let's say you want to stop watching so much TV, but you have a living room with a couch with a TV right in front of you inside of an entertainment center, and the remote is always on the armrest right where you leave it. There's not many barriers between you and the TV, between you and that habit you want to do less of. So how do we increase the friction? Well, we can start by closing the doors on the entertainment center. So now you have to physically become aware of the fact that you're opening the doors to watch TV, and you've become aware and said, "Oh, I'm trying to snap out of this. I need to do less of this." And you have that moment to catch yourself. Sometimes it's simply you need a moment to pull you out of your unconscious mind and make you aware, and something like opening the doors will maybe bring you into the present moment. But let's say that's not enough. The remote is normally right there on your armrest. Put it somewhere inconvenient. Put it in a kitchen drawer. Put it in your bedroom so you have to go up and get it and come back down. Let's say that's still not enough. Do that and take the batteries out of the remote and put them in another drawer. So you have to go get the batteries and then go get the remote and then open the entertainment center and then sit down on the couch and watch TV. So you see how we can continue to stack and add friction between you and that bad habit? Make it harder to do. Anytime I'm implementing a new habit, that is route one, plan A, is how do I make this as easy as possible? And if I'm trying to get rid of something in tandem, how do I make that as difficult as possible? The classic example I was going to allude to is you want to eat less junk food. I love junk food. I love sweets. I simply don't buy them. And another barrier I've added is I'm fortunate enough to now be sponsored by, but before that I was buying quite a lot of Nutrition Solutions meal prep. So I don't have to go to the store and buy junk food. They send me protein donuts and protein bars that are sweet and delicious and great meals. So there's not friction between me and good food choices. There's not even a cooking friction. I simply can have a meal in 90 seconds or 30 seconds if it's a brownie or they're waffles. So that is a great way to improve your good habits and eliminate your bad habits. Make it very easy to do the thing you want to do more of, and very hard to make it to do more of the thing you do or less of the thing you don't want to do, right? So that is what I do, and I don't really do a whole lot more than that. As long as I can make it easy for a few weeks, then the habit is pretty concretely cemented into my mind and into my routine and regimen. And in doing that, you mentioned how do I want to, or you asked me to speak on how does this affect other facets of my life? I used the same thing when I was in sales to cold call. I removed the barriers between me and cold calling by blocking a room in the office for an hour, by having a work phone that was separate from my personal phone, by dedicating time to it and making sure no one could bother me, by having a prospect list of numbers that I would dial on. Because cold calling, for those of you who don't know in sales, it sucks. You're calling strangers and interrupting their days. Nevertheless, it's a necessary evil of the job, and it's how I got some of my best clients. So no matter what habit you want to build, this framework works for fitness, for finance, for nutrition, whatever. And that's how I build habits. So Matt, I hope that answers your question, and I appreciate you asking. Holly asks a fantastic question about a mentality that I love. Fighting being a perfectionist about health and fitness, she says. Avoiding the negative self-talk and not letting one mistake turn into two, turn into three, etc. Or shedding some light on the unhealthy parts of fitness and nutrition, which this is sort of one of them, being a perfectionist. Calorie counting obsession, body dysmorphia, etc. So there's a lot to unpack here, Holly, but I'm going to speak on all of this. We'll start with fighting being a perfectionist about health and fitness. This is a thing that people realize when they get really into health and fitness. They start to have healthier habits, and then they get good at those habits, and they start to struggle with, if I'm not dialed, I'm completely off in the la-la land, making a fucking fool of myself. If I'm not crushing my calorie goal, hitting my protein, training on time, on schedule, on program, then I'm eating cheeseburgers, drinking beer, and sitting on the couch. It's these complete opposite ends of the spectrum. But I believe you have to constantly move across points of the spectrum. Right now, I'm training to run a mile faster than I've ever run it in my life, a 5:15. So I'm more dialed on the side of the spectrum that is on time with training, on time with nutrition. But that's just for a short time. When I overcome this goal and I run the 5:15 mile, I may be less dialed. I may have some more meals out. I may have some cocktails a night or two a week. I'm simply moving across the spectrum. And right now I'm a little bit more all in, but I still have fun. I'm going to an event in my area here, Alive After 5 in Roswell, to have some cocktails and hang out with friends, but I'm still training. I did my 6 a.m. run. I'm going to hit my protein goal. So I think people fail to realize that there is still a point in doing things, even if you can't do 100% of the thing. I think there was a time for me also where if I didn't hit my workouts all week and my step goal, it would lead me to be frustrated and depressed and realized I got less progress. But what I failed to realize, like I always say, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at start to change, was I didn't make 100% progress like I did the week prior, but I made 75% progress. 25% I left on the table, fine. But if I make 75% progress day over day, week over week, year over year, that is insurmountable change. And for some reason, one thing that people struggle with is this all in or all out mentality on fitness. It's, I can't have cheeseburgers and ice cream. I have to have chicken, rice, and broccoli. Terrible healthy meal, by the way. Total bullshit. You don't have to eat that to get ripped. I don't. But really, what it could be is most of the time I have chicken and broccoli, or most of the time I have my nutrient dense, high protein meals. But every once in a while, if I want a cheeseburger, I'm going to have it. And I'm not going to feel some type of way about it because food doesn't own my emotional state because I'm a sentient being. So it's a lesson that sometimes you almost have to organically learn on your own in the journey as you evolve and grow and your relationship with yourself changes. But I've realized now that there's no need to be perfect. And the truth is, you really can't be perfect. So why are we in the pursuit of occasionally great when consistently good is far better? Something I heard Nick Bear say that I absolutely love. Don't let occasionally great be the enemy of consistently good, because consistently good far passes occasionally great in the long term. So realize that fitness exists on a spectrum and that there can be times of the year where you're more dialed and times of the year where you're less dialed and maybe making a little less forward progress. But you almost need those seasons because they draw you towards being more dialed. You may gain a little bit of weight or feel like your workouts aren't as good and you think, you know what, it's time to kick it back up a little bit. I enjoy fitness again. I enjoy being more dialed. If I was always training for the next marathon or the next world record mile attempt or the next ultra marathon, I'd burn out. I got to have seasons of just chilling and training because I enjoy it, and training as maintenance and eating at maintenance so I can have the times where I'm really crushing it and enjoy the fruits of my labor there. No one is ever going to be a perfectionist in fitness, and anyone you see who is consistently fit for years knows this, and they never try to be perfect. They try to be consistently good and get a little bit better than yesterday. Now, with this fitness journey that I talked about, you asked about something else, the dark side of fitness nutrition, or the unhealthy parts, the calorie counting obsession, the body dysmorphia. These are all things that I dealt with and I still deal with today. More the body dysmorphia than the calorie obsession, but it's amazing. I was talking to somebody the other day and I said, it's almost like when you finally get in the best shape of your life, you decide you've never looked worse and you become infatuated with it. And yeah, I still look in the mirror in the morning sometimes and think, I'm not happy with this. I need to bring my chest up. I could be leaner. I could be bigger. Dab, dab, dab. The point is, comparison is the thief of joy. I'm comparing myself to people I see on social media or some arbitrary version of me that doesn't exist yet. But I have to go back and say, look at where you were even just a year ago. I look at pictures of my physique when I started creating content and I am bigger. I am leaner. I'm stronger. So I'm always comparing myself to day 100 or 200 or 300 me to me now, which is day 2000 or 3000, whatever it is, 9 years later. And that brings me a lot of peace and a lot of happiness and a lot of fulfillment. So body dysmorphia is a real thing that everybody struggles with. And I think anybody in the fitness content creation space who says they're not is probably lying to you. I follow people and I know them personally who are big on body positivity, and they're former fatties and they tell you not to do all these things. But when I'm with them in person, we talk about it and they still struggle with it because we're only human. But I'd rather struggle with this than struggle with being fat and being out of shape. The famous saying, life is hard, choose your heart. Being healthy and fit is hard. It comes with a price. It comes with a cost. It comes with some struggles and frustrations. But being fat, sick, and tired all the time is also hard. Life is inevitably, to some degree, suffering. I would rather choose the hard that is fitness and maybe struggling with my body image occasionally over knowing I look and feel like shit all the time. You never really kick body dysmorphia, at least in my experience, but you learn that the brain is not your friend and you are not your thoughts. Fitness is a really good microcosm of teaching yourself that you are not always your thoughts and your brain is not always your friend. When I don't want to go for the run because my brain's telling me not to, I need to go for the run. I am not my thoughts and my brain is not my friend. I need to push through that. When I'm telling myself I don't like the way I look or I think I'm puffier or fatter or smaller, I'm not my thoughts. My brain is not my friend and your brain is not your friend either, nor are you your thoughts. So you need to remember that and continually practice that self-awareness of stepping outside of your own thoughts and being really objective with your measurement of your progress. The calorie counting obsession thing is to a little bit of the same vein, that you are not your thoughts and you are not your friend. But a practical tip I can give you that worked for me when I was calorically obsessed and shredded and binge eating all the time and then over restricting and over exercising was I found the more rules and the more tightly I tracked my diet and my calories, the more I broke those rules. I think I spoke about this in the last episode. Our brain is wired to push boundaries. It's how we made forward progress as early humans. We thought, I can maybe climb that mountain and get to that stream on the other side. It's dangerous, but I need to push the boundary. I need to get to the water. We're wired to do that. And the more rules I create for myself, again, my brain is not my friend, the more I find a way to justify and self-sabotage those rules. So I got away from calorie counting. And instead, I just reduced my meal frequency. I eat 2 large whole food-based meals per day and maybe a snack or two, depending on where I'm at in a cut, bulk, or maintaining phase. And if I'm eating whole foods, high protein, and I'm eating twice a day with a snack or two, that caloric intake rarely adds up to a massive surplus. So that is me limiting the rules. I haven't used a calorie tracking app in ages. Now, of course, I weighed and tracked religiously for years, so I always know directionally where I'm at. It's tattooed in my brain. I can't not look at a piece of food and see caloric and macronutrient content. I think it's a blessing and a superpower because most people are clinically fucking unaware of that. Um, so stepping away from the calorie counting obsession and just not doing it, free your mind and your body will follow. It really is maybe oversimplified, but it worked for me and it's worked for many other people. It works for my coaching clients who struggle with this. They step away from the scale, both food and body weight scale, and they just eat a couple of times a day to nourish their body and support their performance. And what they find is their perspective on food and calories changes. And that when they stopped tracking, they realized they weren't always hungry. They were just eating from a place of obsession or boredom because they saw, I have 700 calories. I might as well fill those. But they didn't stop to ask themselves, are you really hungry? Do you really need it? And that's something I struggled with was, God, I have 800 calories left and I'm kind of full, but I have 800 calories, so I'm going to eat. And then it just turned into a binge. 800 calories, I can fill that with Oreos. And they don't fucking satiate you for anything. So I would way overdo it and eat 1,200 calories of Oreos and then move backwards. So take a break from calorie tracking is what I'm really trying to say, Holly. I hope that answered your question, and I appreciate your level of engagement in the community, all of your level of engagements. You're all very active. I recognize your names, and I appreciate you more than you know. Mr. Luke Bjorkland, good to see you again, my friend, on the thread. He says, the importance of having fitness be a lifelong journey and not stressing over your protein for one day or not hitting your steps one day, knowing that that won't kill you. On the flip side, when you don't hit your protein steps or other big rocks, as I call them, how to have the discipline to get back on track and maybe do more on the next day, not to make up, but to get back in the groove. This is a similar vein to the trying to be perfect or obsessing about the perfection of health and fitness. And the fact of the matter is we cannot do anything balls to the wall forever because we will burn out, like I said. And I used to have the same issue you're having. Low on protein or missed my step goal. I would honestly grossly overcompensate to an unhealthy degree the next day. But the 80-20 rule in fitness and nutrition is eat 80% whole foods, 20% whatever you want. I look at it a little bit more than that. I look at it on a year-to-year basis. If I'm on track 80% of the year and off track 20% of the year, well, that's 74 days or something like that I can be off track. Now, is that going to slow my progress down? Yeah, probably. And am I eating 10,000 calories all 74 days? No. But my rule is just, look, I have some days here sprinkled intermittently where I can sort of goof off and do what I want and what I feel like and still make progress. So I recommend maybe focusing less on your micro goals and focus more on your macro goals. And I don't mean macro in terms of nutrition. I mean macro in terms of big picture, like macroeconomics. What do I want my physique to look like in 2 years? What do I want my perspective on food? I don't use the term relationship with food intentionally. It's too powerful. Words have power and meaning. My perspective on food to look like in 2 years. What do I want my cardiovascular conditioning to look like in 6 months or a year? And when I look at it that way, I find a lot of peace and a lot of pressure comes off my shoulders of not having to feel like I'm perfect every single day. Because the truth is, though it's hard for people to accept, is that one day is not going to undo everything you've done if it's off track, and one day is not going to put back together everything you'd broken over a many-year journey. People gain 60 pounds over 4 years. One perfect day of eating isn't going to solve all your problems, just like one bad day of eating isn't going to ruin all of your progress. Also, accept, understand, and appreciate that, because I know people hear it, but they don't always hear it at the right time, so it doesn't resonate. So I'm telling you now, if you struggle with this out there, you have to understand that the results you're looking for is the compounding effort of doing something for an extraordinary period of time. And a day or two off track, sure, it may be annoying or irritating or result in a little less progress. But if 80 to 90% of your year, you're trekking forward, albeit if only 1% every day, you are going to make tremendous progress. And we're not in this for what we're going to look like in 30 days. We're in this for what we're going to look like in a year or 5 years. A totally different human being. When you look back and, like I do now, don't recognize the person in the mirror. I don't recognize the person in that rock bottom photo that I share on social media. I don't know why he thought the way he thought. I don't know who he is. I don't understand his self-talk or self-image, because as Ethan Suplee, who you may not know, he's a famous actor, and this is a bit of a tangent, but it's important. I'll tie it back. Ethan Suplee was the big fat guy in Remember the Titans. He was in My Name is Earl, and he was over 500 pounds. He's lost and gained, I think, 200 pounds 5 times. So the guy has lost and gained 1,000 pounds. And he finally got to the point where he's now a lean, mean 240 pounds and looks like a beast. And he uploads a photo after the gym to Instagram almost daily and says, "I killed my clone today." Now, what does that mean? Lane Norton is who I got that story from, because he's good friends with Ethan Suplee. Lane Norton's a godfather of sports nutrition and performance. Look him up. Great content. And he cites a research study where they follow people who lost an extraordinary period of weight, but then kept it off for years after. And they did observational studies on them, and they asked them questions. And 85%, I think, was the number. I could be skewing that data point. But a majority of the people in the interview and the survey said they felt as though they had to kill off or do away with a version or their prior identity of themselves. And that's what Ethan Suplee means when he says, "I killed my clone today." And that's how I feel. You are actively working to disband or do away with an identity or a personality trait in you if you really want to adopt these long-term changes, because you can't view food and exercise the way 250-pound did as a newly 190-pound man. You have to make fundamental changes in your ideology and your habits. And you do that by being aware of the fact that you're actively trying to kill your clone every single day. And that comes from hitting the big rocks. But on the days you don't hit the big rocks, you understand, I'm still not who my clone was. And I know now, because I'm actively trying to kill him every day, or her, that I'm going to get back on track tomorrow, because that's what I do. This is who I am. It is part of my identity. It's not just even a thing I do. It is part of who I identify as a fit, healthy human being. And when you correlate your habits with your identity, they become very strong and very concrete. And to get back and point on getting on track the next day, don't do any overcompensation. Don't increase your deficit more if you were in a surplus by accident on your cut. Don't eat an extra 80 grams of protein if you were 80 grams shy the day before. It doesn't really matter. We're not that black and white as physiological beings. It's not really a perfect every 24 hours clock. It resets and you can catch up or make up, or you have like sort of a debt that you need to pay with protein or sleep or training. You just go back to exactly what you were supposed to do the prior day and resume business as usual and take the emotion out of it. You never can fall off the wagon if you don't say, "I fell off the wagon." You simply stay on. Maybe you're hanging on with one hand, but you get back on and mount it and take it head on rather. So hopefully that answers. It was a bit of a strange analogy, but this is all off the cuff. So I appreciate the submission, Luke, and hopefully that answers your question, my friend. Caleb Whittle said, "How do goals play into your fitness journey? There's the aspect of building healthy habits just to live a better life. Then on the flip side, there's the aspect of working towards specific goals. I've always used goals to maintain and improve habits, but I'm curious what your thoughts are on doing it just because it's the right thing to do." This is a pretty insightful thought, and I got to say, Caleb, I agree with you that I believe it is important to have goals to work towards, to drive you towards certain things. I would have a very hard time training every day if I wasn't training for something a couple of times a year. Like I said, sometimes I'm training for something, sometimes I'm training to stay healthy, happy, and mobile and be an active human being. But every once in a while, I get a little bored of that, and I need something to sort of put my back up against the wall and train for, which is why I chose this 5:15 mile to be a part of the world record attempt for the fastest ever 100-person 1-mile relay in July. Because I want to feel like my back's against the wall. I want to feel a little scared. I want a little fire to train for. And when you have something that you're aiming at, and I have an episode on goal setting and how to set goals and why they're important, and then to set them and forget them effectively. And you can go back and watch that. It's one of the earlier episodes. It's in the title. But it's important to set a clear vision for what you want, because you got to be aiming for something. If not, you are quite literally aimless. It's the same principle of being on a program, and maybe at the end of your training program having some strength goals, maybe having a 1-rep max test before, at the beginning, and at the end. You have something to work towards. You have a North Star guiding you, and then you rely on the level of your systems. As James Clear says, we don't rise to the level of our goals, but we fall to the level of our systems to push you towards said goal. So I think it's tremendously important to have goals in your fitness. But I have financial goals. I have since I graduated. It was, I want to make $100,000 as fast as possible, and then it was more than that. And then now it's, I want to save and invest a certain amount of my income every year. And I have all of these little bitty goals and micro and macro goals that I'm working towards year round. But where I put them varies. I may not have a fitness goal in 3 months, but I have a financial and an emotional goal or a spiritual goal. I have to have pillars to put me toward the path that I want to walk, because if not, where am I headed? What's the destination? And that's not the goal. The goal is not necessarily the destination. It's what you learn and what you pick up along the way on the path. The famous saying, the man who loves walking will walk much further than the man who loves the destination. So you pick these goals, you hit them, and then you keep walking on to the next thing. So I think it's tremendously important to have goals. I think if you're out there now and you're not sure why you're doing the fitness thing, you need a why to cling to. It's fundamental in us as humans. Pick a weight loss goal, or pick a bench press max goal, or pick a road race that you want to run and put it on the calendar and pay for it. Put your back against the wall a little bit to see how you handle adversity and then overcome it, because that's how we build confidence and belief in ourselves and see the power in goal setting. So absolutely set goals and crush them. But a couple times a year, give yourself a break and train and eat just because you love yourself, not because you're constantly working for something. Or take the goals in fitness and set them towards your relationship with your significant other, or your family, or your job, or your kids. And then if you constantly have that goal, you'll rarely run out of things to work toward, and rarely hate or be bored with the process of continuous self-improvement. The last question on this thread, Seth Bisbee asks, tips for decision-making without perfect information. Learning how to operate in the gray, with quotes around it. What steps did you go through when making the decision to leave your corporate job to take on HigherUp full time? What do you do if you find yourself having paralysis by analysis, consciously incompetent? You've been listening to the podcast, brother. I appreciate you, man. Thank you so much. There's a great quote I heard on the Rich Roll podcast from a lady who's a professor at Harvard, and I can't remember her name. But she says, instead of being so hung up on making the right decision, just make the decision right. How powerful is that? I mean, I'm going to say that again. Instead of focusing so much on making the right decision, simply make the decision right. Meaning, make whatever call you want to make and say, this is the way it's supposed to be. The analogy she uses is whether or not you should have gotten married to that person or broken up with that person. It doesn't matter. Whichever one you did, you have no way of knowing what alternate reality could have existed as a result of you not making the decision you made. You could have stayed with a partner and been miserable and gotten a divorce anyway in 10 years later, and it would have been far more miserable. Or you could have chosen to stay in that corporate job and ended up hating it and having a toxic boss and quitting 6 months later anyway, and you could have just saved yourself the agony. Or you stay at the job and you end up liking it all right. And you never know, because if you quit, maybe your business venture or your other job would have failed, or the company would have gone under. You have no way of knowing. So simply make a decision and stand firm on the fact that it's right, and don't negotiate with yourself or create scenarios that haven't happened, because you simply have no way of knowing what that alternate path would have worked towards, or what that alternate path would have yielded, rather. When I made the decision to quit my job in July, it was tough because I had just started a new job at a small consulting firm, and I'd only been there for 3 weeks. And it was scary because I thought, what a bad look. These people stuck their neck out for me. Should I do this? But I'm making money and I'm happy. But also, this job is so safe and secure, but I'm making money with my passion. And I agonized and I lost sleep and I fretted and stressed and probably lost hair and years off my life. And then one day I talked to my parents, and they told me, you're going to land on your feet no matter what, and simply evaluate the risks. You don't have kids. You don't have a mortgage. You're in the time of your life where it is literally peak for you to make a risky decision. This is where most people can make a decision and the fallout be minimal or non-existent. And you've built your network so to where you could have a job, God forbid, worst case scenario, tomorrow back in the corporate world. You have people that you know will hire you. What's the problem? So I made the decision right, and I haven't looked back since. So that's how I avoid analysis paralysis, is I simply make the decision right. Stop having analysis paralysis because you simply have no way of knowing. There's infinite information that you can continue to gather before you make decisions that will simply confuse and confound the variables even more. So simply execute and move forward and don't question it. Make the decision right. I hope that's helpful and that it answers your question, brother. Ty just submitted a comment just now that came in. I think for a future episode, the community members send you links to TikToks about fitness topics that want your opinion on and review them. It doesn't have to be like you're calling out anybody or anything, but just your take on it. That's a great idea, Ty. I'm reading this as you posted it. Yeah, I know you're going to listen to the podcast. So if you're in the community and you're watching this, this is a great idea. The next time I post this status in the community, simply drop links to TikToks and I'll give my opinion on the thing the person is saying. I think that's a great idea. So that wraps up this, I guess you could call it another Q&A for the podcast. As always, I appreciate you being here. Please like and subscribe to the YouTube channel if you're listening on YouTube. Give me a rating that you feel I deserve if you're listening on Spotify. We're going to do a step check now. Drop your step check in the comments. It's 3:22 Eastern Standard Time, and I have 15,278 steps. Drop yours in the comments below, and we will see you in the next episode. It isn't easy, but it is simple. Don't overcomplicate it.